Hi everyone. We'll start shortly. I'm just going to let a couple more people in who are in the waiting room and joining, and we'll start shortly. Okay, I think some people are getting familiar with the same old introduction, so they clocked onto the fact that they can log in 5 minutes later and they get to miss me each week. So just by way of introduction, so I'm Tim Vorley. I'm the PI on the overarching Next Generation Services project. And it's great today to have a slightly different focus to some of the conversations to what we've had in previous week, thinking about client versus customer perspectives, and some of the challenges and the opportunities associated with IT adoption in professional services. So just before we move on to the main event, I just want to say a little bit about the project and the background to the overarching project. And then I'm going to invite Fraser McClay to say a little bit about the Uplift project, which we're working on, where the speakers today have really kind of contributed to and challenged some of our thinking. So the core project has been funded under the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund to look at mid-tier firms, and particularly around their AI readiness and what advanced tech means for some of those mid-tier firms. We recognise that these firms are too big to ignore, but often don't have the budgets and the capability in-house to be able to invest in a strategic way in really developing their data and AI capacity. So the nature of the project's had three aspects to it. The first aspect is a series of academic insights where we've done deep dives with a number of firms to understand how they're working, what they're doing, recognizing they don't want to become technology firms, but how do they go about identifying the challenge, and also looking at the wider institutional landscape, thinking about the role of regulators, the role of intermediaries, representative bodies and groups, and understanding the dynamics associated with changing legal and organizational structures. That's then informing the next two parts that you can see on the screen there. So we've been doing some work led by Lucy Kimball at University of the Arts. She has been really kind of driving us on this aspect of futures, looking at scenarios that we've developed to try and challenge professional services firms to think about not just necessarily the short and the immediate horizon, which is all too readily done, especially in partnership models, but to think about the nature of longer term impacts as to the future of the professions and what the firms may do to respond to that. And as part of this, one of the things that we're currently offering as a project fully funded is to be able to go and work with firms about those futures, using those scenarios to help them think about what that might mean for their future strategy and development. The third aspect of the project is one that unfortunately we haven't been able to accelerate at the same pace that we were looking to prior to the lockdown, where we've really been trying to kind of think about going into firms using a design sprint methodology to help them understand and identify what the problem and the challenge is that they're looking to try and address using advanced tech. And I think we've come to think about advanced tech rather than AI and machine learning, which doesn't necessarily have the same level of traction with some of those firms that we're trying to target, but using these technologies in more advanced ways to try and understand how we can support their future growth, competitiveness and productivity. So as part of the core project, again, if you are or you know of a firm that may be interested in talking to us about that, we're able to offer that now online, and we'll be keen to kind of talk as and when about going into firms when the time is appropriate and safe to do that again. So the webinar series, and again today, is kind of the penultimate in the current series, but next week we've got the final one, which will be looking at using those scenarios and exploring kind of uncertainties within that context. We've got some great speakers lined up for next week, as you can see there. If you haven't seen some of our previous webinars, we've had a series of great speakers over the last 8 weeks, and you can find them on the YouTube channel and on the Next Generation Services website. So I'd encourage you to have a look at that, and by all means follow up. The nature of the technology means you need to register week by week. So again, the link's there at the bottom, but please do connect with us and join the webinars next week for the final one in the series. So Finally, I'd just like to thank the speakers today for giving up their time, as well as being subjects of the research and engaging with us on that front, which has been fantastic. They're now willing to share that. And I'm going to hand over to Fraser just to say a little bit about the project before moving on to the speakers and the main event. So thanks again, everyone, for participating. And I hope everyone finds the session insightful and enjoyable.
Thanks, Tim. And I'd just like to add a thank you to the speakers as well. I've been working on this project for the last 6 months with Tig, our postdoctoral research associate, and we've taken quite a different approach than we have with some of the other projects, in that we've really tried to be customer-centric, customer-focused, explore does AI and legal tech add value, does it not? What are the barriers to implementation? Where is the innovation coming from? Is it client-led? Is it coming from the tech providers? Is it coming from the customers? And in this instance, where we've got legal counsel, and the 4 speakers are all legal counsel, some of them are involved with developing technology and providing technological solutions. Others are with some really, really well-known companies, and I'm really excited about learning about what they've got to say today. We've so far conducted approximately 40 in-depth interviews with 40 different legal counsels, and we'll be sharing the results of that separately, but today we're wanting to learn insights from our 4 panelists. There'll be opportunities for questions at the end, but you can also ask questions on the chat. So I'll start by introducing Neil Bruce, Vice President and Group Counsel at American Express. And I was involved with the initial interview with Neil, and there was some really interesting insights on the customer experience and how American Express works in terms of AI and legal tech. So welcome, Neil.
Hi, Fraser. Good afternoon to everyone. Can you hear me loud and clear? Fantastic. Well, thank you. So what I wanted to do is just to spend a few minutes talking to you about our innovation and tech journey so far, including what has enabled progress and produced results in my team and some of the challenges. And this is in the context of my part of the American Express global legal team, which for these purposes we provide shared services support, program management and multi-jurisdictional support for Amex in 20 countries around the world. My team here is about 25 heads. We're actually already located in several countries with a major hub in the UK. So even before the COVID-19 crisis and the pandemic, we had a few virtual team members. Now, of course, everyone in the team is virtual. What we do is we do contract support, and that ranges from everything from NDA churn through to supporting larger commercial contracts, the contracts that our company enters into with our partners, business partners. They're based on templates that are also the more bespoke one-off contracts, as well as doing legal research, advice, and coordination for multi-market projects. So in my team, I think I'd say we've been on an innovation journey for a while. And it's not just about technology, of course, it's about how we structure ourselves, how we use the team, how we use lawyers and non-lawyers, the processes that we deploy, and as well as, of course, a technology foundation and enabler as well. And just to give you a sense of some of the technology areas that we've been leveraging already or are in the process of exploring, you won't be surprised it's in the spaces of workflow initiation and allocation, e-signature solutions, contract automation, document review, horizon scanning for regulatory change, and just generally using collaboration type platforms. These are all sort of key things that we're very engaged in at the moment. So that's our context. So I wanted to talk about 4 things really. Firstly, mindset and organizational readiness, demonstrating the need and the value, skills and expertise, and finally getting adoption. So for us, I would say this sort of mindset that we have when it comes to this sort of innovation space in legal services is really important, and we don't get anywhere with unlocking the power of innovation and technology and legal unless we have a more expansive mindset in the first place. And so particularly for a company like mine, Amex is 170 years old. We've had quite a traditional setup in the legal team, 350 lawyers, legal staff around the world, typically with junior lawyers and more senior lawyers providing advice and contract support in quite a manual way in our main operating locations. But in the last few years, we've been much more innovative, or at least that's what we've sought to do. And a key foundation is, the moving away from the legal team just being thought as providing legal advice or contracts, but really just to see our mission more broadly to provide legal solutions for the company. Of course, legal advice, yes, contracts, but also thinking, how can we integrate with the business more deeply? How can we give them what they need at the right time in the right place, and for the right level of efficiency, whether it's self-help, Q&A bots that help, contract creation toolkits, whatever it is. We want to be more expansive with how we think about what we do and what our job is. And to put another way, I think we've also started to think about what we do in legal as its own product. And that enables us, I think, then to look at our customer, which for our purposes, we would say our main customers would be our internal business partners within the company. What do they need from us? What's the bigger problem that they have that we can help them solve? And so for us, this is about being customer centric. And I would say in this sense, being an in-house legal team is really no different from how a company more broadly thinks about what its customers need and how best to support them. So we very much try to focus, tune our mindset to that level. And of course, with this realization, we're much more focused on delivering the solutions that solve our customers, our business partners' problems. And we do that, of course, by using our lawyers, our talented lawyers, by developing the right processes, and of course, technology in that right mix. And of course, I'd also say, I think as we think about this space, and particularly thinking about innovation and how to use technology, is not to be constrained with what you think is possible. Start with a clean sheet of paper. Don't think about what the limitations are of the company, and try to figure out what's the real problem. A really sort of design thinking style approach. What's the real problem? What are the possible solutions for how we can get there? I think that's been particularly helpful for us. And again, it's all part of this much more expansive mindset. So just, again, for perhaps the organizational readiness side, I would say it's very important for us to reinforce within the legal team that innovation and change is good. In fact, it's not just good, it's necessary. The world has changed, the company has changed, how we operate has changed. And that's changed over the last 20 years, 10 years, 5 years, 3 years, and even the last 6 months, of course. And we need to keep changing too. We've also recognized that it's also really important to have an external mindset. We can learn, what can we learn from other companies? What we can learn from other providers? What can we learn from law firms? There's new ideas and tools coming up all the time. So we do keep an eye out for that, just to take inspiration and see if we can take advantage of some of these ideas that are coming out there. And of course, in this space, it's really important to reinforce how important it is to try new things. And of course, when you try new things, sometimes it doesn't work. But the important thing is that you learn from that experience and embrace the need to evolve and change. When it comes to demonstrating the need and the value of tech as part of your mix, that's been critical. And for us, that really has meant focusing on the data. What does the data tell us? What story does that support? So once we kind of know what the particular problem area that we're trying to look at is, managing workflow, producing contracts, whatever that is, we need to know the magnitude. How many of these things do we have to do? What's the volume? What's the velocity? What are the SLAs that apply? And only when we know that, can we really help to figure out what the actual right solution is for that problem. But of course, this is, this sounds foundational, but it is really necessary, because often what you end up with doing is actually making a prioritization decision on where to spend your resources. Do we invest in this tech solution? Do we invest in creating another position somewhere? But having this data really enables you to tell that story. And we found this really powerful. So looking at what we were doing as a team, we recognize, hey, we do 400 NDAs a year. Wow, imagine if we could have some automation and better support to enable that to us to deliver that more efficiently and quickly. And the numbers begin to stack up, particularly when you have that sort of scale. But looking at how much time we can save, what's the opportunity cost as well, and what are the opportunities that we can open up by perhaps taking away some more administrative time that some of our senior lawyers are having to spend on a more manual process. If we can say release back 15% of their time by smartly introducing some of these automation and technology support as part of their work mix, what does that mean for the company? How can they better deploy that 15%? So that's some calculations. They might be quite crude, but that's some of the calculations that we've done. And it's been particularly illuminating in terms of how we think about where to invest our resources. Excuse me for a second. The next area that I wanted to touch on is skills and expertise. So again, I mentioned before that we had been quite a traditional legal department. And so, we've mainly got lawyers who are good at being lawyers. But of course, lawyers are not necessarily always the best people to talk to when you're thinking about process excellence, organization, and how to use technology to deliver at scale. So we quickly realized that lawyers don't always have these skills, and we need to bring in other people. So that's what we did. So we've got some technologists that we work with, project managers and analysts, and they've made a massive impact over these last couple of years. I mean, even something as straightforward we found as an out-of-the-box contract automation product still requires integration with our tech environment, sign-ons, integration with document management, and of course, configuration of the actual product itself. How do we create our contract templates and the choices within this tool, which is as much about, I think, process and decision trees as it is about the legal substance. So, and we know that even more so with some of the more sophisticated tools out there that are using AI to learn, they require training over time. And again, there's a very particular way to approaching that to getting the best results. So we quickly learned not just to bring in other complementary skills, but also to educate our lawyers to think along some of these lines as well. And I think lastly, one of the things is encouraging adoption. So we've built the case for why we should have some better technology or changes in our processes or more innovation. How do we actually get our team members to use it at the coalface? It's been a surprising challenge, actually. I guess there's a general resistance amongst folks from the established ways of working. And when we've invested time and effort to deliver some form of new automation tool and found out that people are not really using it as we had intended, we're like, well, hold on a minute, why? What does that mean? And so I think we've been more thoughtful about how we approach this generally. And here's a number of the things that we've done that have been successful. So number one, we get the team involved in the journey. We talk about our mission, the strategy, the need to automate legal as a product, focusing on what our customers need. We get them involved in the sort of the problem solving. We have some design thinking sessions, for example, really to focus on what is the real problem here? How can we think about solutions? We get them involved in delivery, so perhaps reflection and individual and team goals about how to deploy and use some of these more innovative ways of operating. Of course, we get them involved in user testing and sort of the launch process. We've had to sort of design internal communication and awareness campaigns, and we found it particularly helpful to get lawyer colleague testimonials. So I've used this tool, this was my use case, and this was the impact it made to me or my team. That's been particularly powerful for us. Monitor usage, how are the teams actually using this? Are people using this thing daily, infrequently? Are they never logging into it? And try to figure out what that means. And of course, if all of that fails, sometimes a bit of S1 direction about this is the way we were going. We're going to turn off some of the old ways of doing things because it makes sense for us to adopt this way of working. So we've done that as well, but not as much. We've tried to focus on all the other ideas as well. So I guess that's really a counter through the key issues I wanted to talk about. I'd say we're nibbling away at this innovation space, and there's definitely no turning back for us. I think we've started out with good foundations, which I think is the important thing. Thinking about our mindset, legal as a product, being very customer centric in terms of trying to help solve the real problem out there. And I think that, I'd fair to say for us at least, the results are demonstrating value, but it's definitely a learning curve. But I have to say, I'm really excited for what the future holds and all the more sophisticated and powerful tools that I know are out there that we haven't yet embraced.
Thank you very much, Neil. Each time I listen to Neil, I get new insights and learn new things, but particularly focusing on some of the challenges with adoption within the company. AI and legal tech as a change agent, having expansive mindsets. So don't be constrained by what you think is possible and the solutions that AI can provide. There'll be opportunities to ask Neil and all of the other speakers questions later, but I'd now like to introduce James Sullivan from Monzo Bank. Monzo was one of the first internet-based or app-based banks, I understand. So welcome, James.
Thank you very much. I'll just share my screen. While I'm just getting that ready, so I'm head of legal at Monzo. I'm also on the advisory board of the Law Boutique, which is actually a legal process optimization company, and I'm on the exco of the Disruptive GC Network, which is a network of GCs in disruptive businesses. So I just can't. There we go. So I guess I thought Neil's presentation was really interesting, and a lot of the things that he said really struck a chord with me. I suppose I'm kind of starting maybe from a sort of kind of base level, which is like why legal tech at all. And I love this schematic that Plexus Gartner put together last year, which really talks about how typical resource allocation works within a legal function. And as you'll see, 50% of the time that's being spent by the legal function is typically being carried out on this sort of low value, reactive, low risk work. While only 10% is being provided at the kind of very strategic level, and that ultimately results in the legal function being seen and actually performing as a service provider rather than actually providing strategic input. And really that's really my starting point for like why we would even think about technology. But I do think there's a real danger with technology in legal tech, that we just think that legal tech is some kind of silver bullet that can come along and we just plug and play and all the problems go away. And I've definitely seen that sometimes in a hiring context as well, where there's a problem. So I'm not talking specifically to Monzo, but in previous businesses where we will hire someone because there is a problem, whereas the person that's hired probably has some experience and skills to solve that problem, and they're allocated so that they've got the time to focus on a problem, but they aren't necessarily the solutions to the problem. So often the problem is multifaceted, and it actually needs a deeper insight to solve. And I kind of see that with technology in a legal tech perspective. I think in my mind, legal tech is there to support and enable systems and processes. So you need to get your systems and processes fixed first before you actually identify and implement the technology solutions that optimize them, basically. But also think about like why you are implementing legal tech at all. And as per the sort of the first slide, like for me, the goal should always be about reducing the low value, low risk work and enabling the team to focus on the more important high value, high strategic work. So when I speak to my network and I say, like, what's your ideal legal tech? What does it look like? And what's really interesting, I think, is that quite often I don't hear, well, I'd really love an e-discovery platform. That's like I dream about having an e-discovery platform. What you actually hear is something which is a bit more technology neutral, and it's more about the outcome and the solution rather than the system itself. And like automation really kind of is the kind of common denominator, I think, that I hear. And what people are looking for is something that can make stuff happen with minimum human intermediation. And I think that's really what we really need to think about when we're thinking about legal tech, because I think it's very, very easy sometimes to think about the volume. In fact, I'll just move to this slide, the volume of solutions that are out there. So like, if you're a GC looking at, and I appreciate Neil's probably in a slightly different space. Amic's probably a bit more developed than Monzo. We've only been around 5 years, but I know that certainly, the GCs in the sort of the early stage company sector are definitely struggling with cost, budgets and resource, but also just prioritization. So they want to perhaps implement some legal tech, but actually they don't know where to start. And part of the problem is that, you know, when they sort of look at what's out there, these are the categories that they see. You know, there are extraction technologies, document automation, workflow matter management, and other expert systems. And what they're really seeing is a whole load of disparate solutions that aren't joined up, and that actually, I think, is a massive barrier for adoption in my view, which really comes on to this point. So like GCs are confronted with an abundance of different solutions to all kind of legal problems. But actually, when you're actually there looking for a solution, they're not typically joined up. It's very much a piecemeal approach, and that makes it really, really difficult to navigate from a GC perspective. And I know, and I'm sure I'm not alone. I certainly speak to a lot of tech providers, and like it's really easy to be sold at. And you know, be really interested in what's out there, but ultimately, you know, as the GC, you need to be owning the problem and identifying what type of solution you need, and prioritizing what type of solution you need, and then like thinking about how you adopt that solution. So when I think about like tech providers that pitch to me, I mean, I think the key point for me is about making it relevant. I speak to a lot of tech providers, and like from a consumer's perspective, you know, I think these may be amazing solutions, but they're not all necessarily going to be fit for my needs or my business's needs. And I think it's really important that tech providers don't try and ram a circle into a square hole. That you recognise that there are a number of different solutions that do different things, and some solutions might really be, you know, on point for a larger business with, you know, multi-jurisdictional business that's got like a lot of complexity, but that same solution may not be fit for purpose for an early stage business. So like making it relevant is really, really important. And the other point is around really trying to understand the problem that the GC is trying to solve. Like if the GC is trying to solve cost management, selling some kind of e-discovery tool isn't really going to solve that. So you know, we can only take one bite of the cherry at a time. So like really understanding that that GCs are working from a point of prioritization is really important. And then from the GC's perspective, and I think this is where like Neil's session was really interesting in terms of adoption. I certainly agree that, you know, I think lawyers are perhaps more resistant to change than others. Even those that work in tech companies, I think is the same. I think I saw some stats which reported recently, which talked about lawyers being in the 90th percentile of skepticism and the 89th percentile of autonomy. The consequence of which is that they don't like being controlled, and they are, you know, they tend to be very skeptical about whether a solution will actually improve how they work. And lawyers are like just by personality, it's a very individualistic activity. You know, lawyers don't approach like legal services from the same way. It's a very individual thing. So when you're trying to put lawyers into a process, like that can be quite difficult, even though it may be good for them and they may see the benefits of that, but it definitely requires change and change behavior, and change is always different. So I think when you're looking at it from the GC perspective, you know, picking up on Neil's point, I think getting the team involved in defining what the problem statement is and the objectives and the desired outcomes is absolutely critical. If you go off and as a GC and you've identified what you think is the problem and you found the solution and you impose it upon the team, that is sure to fail. And actually, as the GC, you know, you may be a little bit far away from the grassroots of the problem, and your team probably are much closer to the details of the problem than you might be. I'd also take the point that you should tackle the smaller, simpler solutions first. There's no point going from 0 to 100 in a few days. You know, you might start with a smaller, simpler solution and then gradually iterate upon that. And that might mean actually just, you know, designing something internally without buying an out of the box solution, even if it's just like mapping something out in an Excel spreadsheet. Like start with simplicity and build upon that. And then don't forget that it's all about people and processes before technology. So don't think that technology will solve all of your problems. Recognize that ultimately you are dealing with people, whether it's your internal customers or whether it's your internal team, and they've got to be on board and they've got to adopt the change that is required upon them. And that requires actually defining what the new processes are. So that's a quick canter through. I'm quite conscious I didn't mention the size of the legal team. So Monzo's been around since 2015. We've had a banking license for 3 years, so it's still fairly early days. We have a team of 10 with 6 lawyers and 2 people in company secretary and two people in vendor operations. We do have a number of tech solutions, but I think that we're always looking for more. But even working in a tech company, you know, it's still slow to adopt technology as an internal team. So I'm always interested in listening to others who tell a similar story.
Thank you very much, James. And it was quite amazing to me how some of the things you shared have come up in the interviews that Tig has been conducting with other legal counsel as well, that there's a need to focus on using legal tech so that the lawyers can have more space to work on high-value strategic solutions, that legal tech and AI is not always a silver bullet. How solutions are really important, but some of the platforms don't seem to be joined up, and there's not something out there that holistically solves all problems or creates all solutions. I'd like to remind those of us who are here today that if you do have questions, you can ask them at the end, but we can use the chat, the Zoom group chat function to ask questions, and our panelists may be able to answer some of those questions during today's session. I'd now like to introduce Ife Okoli-Watson. Ife's with Thomson Reuters, and I think that it's a really interesting job that Ife has, but also Thomson Reuters is quite interesting because although they have their own legal team and legal counsel, they also develop technological solutions for others and sell those. Welcome, Ife.
Hi. Let me just share my screen, and whilst I'm doing that, I'd just like to, it's actually Thomson Reuters. Can you see that? And can you hear me? Great. Yeah, so as Fraser mentioned, I'm Assistant General Counsel at Thomson Reuters. We have actually quite a large legal team, over 75 lawyers in over 200 locations, so it's a fairly dispersed, large global team. And as an in-house lawyer in a company that develops legal tech for customers, what I wanted to do today was to maybe expand a bit upon some of the drivers that we see internally and also from our customers for adopting legal tech, and then a bit about some of the benefits and barriers, much of which have already been spoken to by the other speakers today, but hopefully I'll try and bring that all together as succinctly as I can. But I think James mentioned one of the big things we are hearing from our customers is the need to have a tech provider with joined up solutions, and actually that's something that we're working very hard on. Some of our products are already integrated, and we're also working on having a platform where you can either access all of these products, or at least you can pick and choose and create your own interface, as it were. So that's certainly something we're hearing, and we're hoping to launch in the market in the not too distant future. So just turning to my presentation, again, because we develop and market tech, often the feedback we get from our customers is that there is a lot of pressure to cut costs, and actually that's something we're seeing ourselves internally, particularly with the current situation with the pandemic forcing most of us to work from home. There's a more focus on using tech because you've got dispersed teams, but there's also more focus on cutting costs because of the economic climate that we find ourselves in. So there's a bit of a catch-22 there. And so whilst general counsel and department heads are recognizing the merits of adopting tech solutions, there's also some lack of awareness of what software is available and what they deliver, and also the cost of the software is also usually a big pain point for many of our customers. So for instance, one of Thomson Reuters surveys of in-house lawyers found that half had seen their legal spend come under greater scrutiny by their board in the last 3 years. And I think that's something that actually we're going to continue to see in the current economic environment. For the lawyers, as has already been mentioned by my co-speakers, don't necessarily have a reputation of being enthusiastic drivers for tech innovation, often preferring human expertise as being, better. But, with legal teams being overstretched and under-resourced, I think we're definitely going to start to see that turning to technology, picking up pace. So technology is critical on so many levels. Again, my co-speakers have already touched on this, but some of those include the improvement in collaboration internally as well as with your external suppliers, your law firms, etc. If you don't have the right technology, you will definitely fall behind regardless of the industry, behind competition. But so many lawyers and law firms are still kind of sticking to basic tools like Microsoft Word and Excel to manage things like invoices. Whereas if you adopted an e-billing tool like, Thomson Reuters Legal Tracker, for example, we're finding that people who do adopt that are reporting, significant cost savings, some of them by up to 20%, because it enables lawyers to understand what their real costs are in real time, and it helps identify the drivers of these costs. And as they say, you can't manage what you can't measure. So a tool like Legal Tracker helps you to do just that. So we've already spoken, my co-speakers have already touched on a number of these different tools, and has been identified. Half the problem is isn't knowing what you want to do, what type of work. There are various types of legal tools on the market, but some of them, as I mentioned, will help you track costs, but others do what I like to call smart working. I think it's worth investing in legal tools that help you manage your resources. So whether it's document creation and document review, which can be done with a tool like Contract Express, which TR developed, or whether it's tech-enabled self-service tools for end users like matter intake forms, which are available on collaboration platforms so that the business can actually instruct the legal team in an automated and efficient way. These are tools that help manage your caseloads. But then at the other end of the scale, we're seeing tools, AI-driven predictive analysis tools that help you determine the best outcome for your client, and might help you determine whether you should be setting cases before trial, because tools like that can even help prepare for emerging trends like famines, earthquake, recession, resulting from events like COVID-19. So for instance, the Thomson Reuters Westlaw Edge uses artificial intelligence to provide a variety of information about US federal legislation, and it can predict even the likelihood of the bill's likely passage into law. So these are things that a number of law firms are beginning to adopt. And then there are tools on the market that can help lawyers uncover patterns as to whether a judge is sympathetic towards an argument, by analyzing past decisions, and tools that help you mine and analyze data from past lawsuits and make connections and predictions of an outcome, and which in turn helps you manage your outside counsel and legal spend. So all of these things are kind of out there on the market, but you do need to do a lot of research to determine which tools you need, what it is you need, and then work backwards to find the right tool that will enable you to do that. Even with things like diversity, which is currently a hot topic, having an automated system that helps you collect the data, track that data, monitor the data, and then report on your D&I initiatives could be very key in meeting those initiatives. And I think with factors like COVID-19 and the increasing need to enable remote and flexible working, it's even more imperative going forward that legal lawyers start to look at these tools in a more holistic way. So in terms of, touch briefly on the benefits of adoption, I think we've touched on that and they're fairly obvious, but in summary, it enables the legal department to gather more data about how they're performing. It allows them to make informed strategic decisions. So for example, Legal Tracker will give you a solution that helps you improve your law firm management, helps you the interactions you have with them, because now you're not just talking anecdotally, you have the data to back up the discussions and the decisions you're making, helps you track your matter management and work allocation. And it improves greater transparency and gives you, business records and audit trails as well. So effectively, these tools provide a holistic view of the work of the department and facilitate discussions between you and your suppliers. And as I said, help informed decision-making. But then in terms of the barriers that we're seeing, and I think, as I mentioned right at the very beginning, one of it is the fact that, these tools are dispersed, and choosing a tech provider that has an integrated system is key, and can be quite difficult to find. But in order to find the right tool, you've got to spend time to do the research, and that can be quite difficult because a lot of in-house lawyers are really time poor and too busy dealing with their daily workloads to think more strategically about what tools they need to investigate and adopt. So for instance, within Thomson Reuters, given the size of our department, we've actually created a sub-working group of lawyers who are tech savvy, interested in technology, have an innovative mindset to go out and test some of these tools, and then help with the implementation of the tools, and then report to the executive leadership teams on what they think the department needs and how we go about getting adoption of it. So even, we also suffer from the same issues that other lawyers suffer from, in that it's quite hard to get us to adopt new technology, and so we do need a concerted effort focused on those sorts of implementation projects. And thankfully, we have people who are willing to do that. But also because we are effectively a mini law firm within the company, a lot of these tools are beta tested on us before they're rolled out, and we have quite a good feedback loop with our product development teams in terms of improvements and integration and that sort of thing. So I think we're in quite a unique position, whereas a smaller law firm or a legal department might struggle in that regard, and that's why good relationship with your suppliers is key. Also, obviously, persuading stakeholders outside of the legal department to fund new technologies could be a big challenge. I mean, if your senior executives are reluctant to embrace new technology, this could make it quite difficult. But some of our customers are co-opting us to help present the benefits and the savings that will accrue in order to get the approval that they need. And anecdotally, we're finding that depending on the industry, you can measure the take-up and adoption of new technology depending on the industry. So certain tech focused industries are more likely to adopt new tech than, say, more conservative industries like construction, perhaps, where things are, slow to change. So, and that's really it in a nutshell for me.
Thank you very much, Evie, and thanks for sharing your experience in Thomson Reuters. Discussion of the barriers, the opportunities. I thought it was really important and topical to talk about inclusivity or inclusion and diversity, but also, once again, bringing up the need for integrated, joint-up solutions and platforms. Our final speaker today, before we opened up to questions, and I see some of you are on the Zoom group chat, great, keep asking questions there because we are getting quite close to 1:30. But is Alistair Maiden. Alistair is slightly different from others. He has worked in legal counsel and still is legal counsel, but he runs a business Psych that provides legal tech solutions, and he also lectures in legal tech at Manchester University. Welcome, Alistair.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, really interesting to go through, and I'll there's some great content and some things that the other speakers have said that I really strongly agree with. And the main point that I'd want to emphasise is the importance of getting your analog process and documentation, etc., correct before moving into digitising anything. So that is something that I'm absolutely sold on. I speak as the convert, really. So I used to be a legal director for Asda. I ran a team of 15 lawyers looking after the transactional legal process, everything from contracts, real estate, corporate transactions as well. And I guess I was very much a traditional lawyer. I'm now the CEO of Psych. We're a legal technology consultancy. We have about 60 consultants working across the world, working in all of the different types of technology that the other speakers have talked about. And we help typically large corporates like Unilever and HSBC, but also some smaller organisations as well, to help understand the differences between this plethora of different legal technology that's available, and really try and match their requirements to the right solution or solutions, and it often is solutions, as well as understanding one of the things that's consistent amongst our customers is it's quite often the case that they already have the technology they need for a particular task, they just don't know that they have it. Something that's very consistent in large organizations is they don't communicate very effectively within the organization. So sometimes it's a question of just unlocking and repurposing technology that's already available. Once we've found the right tech, obviously, and the bulk of our business is helping organizations to implement the technology. You know, that in itself, legal tech is still quite a nascent space. I think it's fair to say that there's a pretty large delta between what is sold and what is actually deliverable. And so we help customers to understand that difference, but also we've got a lot of experience in how to do it correctly and how to do it, you know, developing best practice in the area. So my background, as I said, was a lawyer. And it's quite interesting actually, because I think we're seeing in the last couple of years, particularly, we're seeing this massive adoption now of legal tech, and I think that's only going to be accelerated by COVID. We call these events, you know, they conveniently seem to be happening, well, for my business anyway, conveniently seem to be happening more regularly now. They're kind of catalyst events, and they do seem to drive adoption. And I think the first of such catalyst events was probably the last financial crisis in the noughties, and you know, that's when I started to become aware of legal tech and document automation in particular. But I kind of had my own catalyst event when I was at ASDA, because I simply couldn't cope with the demand for contracts for the business, from the business. I was telling Fraser and Tag recently that I used to have to use, when I went into the building at ASDA, I had to use the service entrance, because if I walked through the atrium, it could take me up to half an hour to get to my desk, while I would kind of very embarrassingly try to field questions about contracts that I had no idea about. So, and I just couldn't cope really. I couldn't cope with the volume, I couldn't cope with the complexity, I couldn't cope with the demand for pace. So I was forced to lead a program to digitize our contracts process, and we delivered using a combination of different systems. This is back in 2012, so it's some time ago, and legal tech wasn't such a thing, but using a combination of procurement software that we already had, e-signature software that we already had but hadn't really used properly, and also document automation, we created an end-to-end contract process. And you could create a contract, you could negotiate it, get it approved, get it signed, store it, and then use the data within that process for reporting purposes. It was very effective. We reduced the average contract cycle from 17 days to 5 days, and we reduced our spend on contracts, or actually our overall legal spend rather, by 20% through a combination of freeing up a lot of time, as Neil and James mentioned, and Iffy mentioned earlier, freeing up a lot of time. But we also reduced the number of disputes very significantly, because we increased the proportion of transactional activity which was covered by a written contract, which we could find. You know, and I know that sounds very kind of basic, but when I started at ASDA, only about 50% of our spend and income was covered by written contracts. And most of the exposure was where there wasn't a contract. Dealing with the people side of that, which I think is very important, you know, I was actually quite a traditional lawyer. I am a restless character, but don't get, you know, I was really into drafting contracts and I had chitty on contracts on my desk. I don't really have a tech background. I didn't do an engineering degree or anything. But my team initially really rejected the idea of automation. And the first time I spoke to them about it, they said, look, Alistair, you're trying to build a legal robot to replace us. And, you know, that was a bit of a shock to me, actually. And I hadn't really appreciated the need for change management in that respect. But I think it's fair to say that over time, they began to see the benefits of it. And in two ways, actually. Firstly, there were those members of my team that got involved in the project and really liked the process, which I think Neil and James alluded to earlier, of you kind of, to automate a contract, you have to actually deconstruct it first and understand the decision logic, conditionality. I think that is such a fascinating exercise. I still love doing it. It's like going beyond just drafting a contract and thinking of the variable ways in which it might be used, but beyond that, how you can use those variables to drive approvals, to drive reporting, to drive MI, to reduce risk, etc., etc., and over time to learn. And you know, it's very interesting actually that quite a few of my team who were quite junior at the time have gone on to be extremely successful by acquiring new skills and developing this passion. On a more basic level, I think my team loved it because they could go home earlier. It really reduced the pressure on them. It facilitated everyone in Asda, and they still use it now, knows that if they want a contract or they want to terminate a contract or they have a dispute or they want to instruct an external law firm, they have a single web portal that they go to and every request starts in the same place. And this means that that portal's available 24/7. And believe me, it takes some of the pressure off. I'm sure if I was there now, I wouldn't have to use the service entrance anymore because, you know, the colleagues have learned over a period of time that it's more efficient to use the portal than it is to harass the lawyer. And I think that's very important. Conscious of time, you know, I did want to relay one great story actually about Asda. When I left, you know, I think like many lawyers, I was fairly convinced of how critical I was to the overall process of contracting at Asda, and that when I left, it would all fall apart. But when I went back and asked them, you know, how are things? Are you missing me? They said, look, Alistair, you automated yourself, so we're not missing you at all. And I think that's really important because I go on to tell another story, which is when I started the business of Psych, I needed to augment my consultancy income by doing the occasional legal work for businesses in the Yorkshire area where I live. I actually ended up doing a contract or advising on a contract with Asda. It was quite interesting because I'd actually written the contract, so it was a bit of an unusual position to be in, and I kind of did it very reluctantly in the first place. I wrote a set of comments, and they were sent off to the director of the business, and he forwarded them on to Asda. And within about 10 minutes, I received from the director of the business a response, and I was quite surprised at the timing. I read through the response. I admired the style and eloquence of the way that the response was put together. And then I realized that I was actually negotiating with myself, and that the procurement recipient at Asda had actually used the playbook that me and my team put together, and the system was able to analyze the response and come up with a counter response very quickly. So, you know, look, I'm conscious that I want to leave time for questions. I think just one point that I wanted to finish on actually is there is this, because I think this is still a nascent area, there are so many different choices out there. It's incredibly easy to choose the wrong system or to choose the right system, but then the output is perhaps not what you expected because your process and your templates are wrong. I think that has triggered, you know, if I look at Legal Geek last year, which is a big legal technology event, there was a lot of kind of bring back boring and, you know, people, process, technology. And that's right, you do need to get that right. But don't underestimate the fact that embarking on a journey to digitize can actually itself be a catalyst to change. You know, knowing that you have gone to your finance director and committed to a certain deliverable in return for getting a certain budget to, for example, use contract automation or e-discovery, that itself can be a great catalyst for change and can really focus attention away from, you know, some of the routine activity and a lot of in-house work is always going to be putting out fires, back into, right, okay, how do we make an investment in this tech and in this process accordingly for the long-term benefit of the business? And I think that's a good point to stop.
Thanks, Alistair. Fantastic. Really interesting. I know the clock is ticking. Do we have any questions from the audience, please? I know there's some on the chat room. I'm going to ask a quick question. Where do you see yourselves, to any of the panelists, being in 1 year time, 3 years time? Is it going to be like Alistair said, we've automated ourselves and the world's going to be run by robots? Or are you going to be involved in the higher value strategic activities that James and others have talked about?
Well, I'll start. Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that in a year, certainly in 3 years, I do think that we will see a lot less repeat work that's being done by a human, or at least it's not started by a human. You might be a completer finisher as a human, but actually I think some of that early automation, sort of the playbook, the piece that Alistair was talking about, I definitely think that is a growing need. And I think contracting absolutely, particularly, is a high volume area. You know, we have exactly the same issue in Monzo. It's just about how you allocate resourcing to different types of contracts. I think there's another piece around segmenting contracts, that you're just focusing on the complex piece, the complex contracts, and you're finding an automation solution for the basic ones. So I don't think it's just about replacing humans with automation. It's augmenting a process so that humans are focused on the things that humans should be focused on.
Can I ask a question? Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, please.
Oh, yeah, thank you all. Alistair, a question for you. I'm interested in cross industries, professional services, technological innovation. So can you see the potential for your technological offer to other industries, let's say insurance, let's say banking, because those processes to improve? You know, the issues exist in different industries, and it could be that other industries are more mature to absorb this change.
Yeah, I think that's a good shout. Look, it's quite interesting actually how with our more mature customers, we've seen that kind of cross-pollination. It's quite interesting because no one expects the legal team to be the innovative part of the business, but with some of the stuff that we've done, particularly things like FAQ chatbots, using advanced search AI technology to pick out key data from documents. Those things are absolute, and also on a basic level, I mean, banking is the classic example where for our banking customers, we have started working for the legal team to produce legal documents. And now we also work for the commercial lending organizations to produce their commercial lending documents as well. And actually, when you start to think about it, I think Simon, our head of financial services, is on the call. When you start to think about it, any industry which is document heavy can benefit from this kind of tech.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. We may have time for 1 or 2 more questions. I know some of the speakers may need to go as well. I know there's been some questions asked on the chat room, but I would like to thank everybody today for joining us. I found it very interesting and fascinating, particularly like to thank the four panelists, but also Zoe and Sully, who have done a lot behind the scenes, Tim Vorley, who's made this happen, and Tig especially, who's been heavily involved with all of the interviews, and of course the funding bodies who are funding this research, industrial strategy and UK research and innovation. I have one final question, I think, for the speakers, and that is there a message to the funding body, the policymakers, the government out there that would help enhance performance in the sector through AI innovation technology?
I think one angle from my side, and I don't know whether those funding or policy objectives would really be that relevant, but is just, I guess, rounding out education for people coming into the industry, the legal industry. So being much more savvy around all of these different parts of what could be, you know, the normal environment for how we deliver legal services from here on in. This mix of process, human beings, you know, our grey matter, but also how to think about technology and how best to approach that and make it work. Apologies for the background noise.
Yeah, I'd absolutely agree with that. Education is key, but I also think it's about building trust. It's like, how do you demonstrate, particularly to lawyers, that you can actually trust the technology that they perhaps don't, when they don't understand how it works. That would definitely be key for me.
I'm not sure if you say so. I'll go next. Yeah, I think to the policymakers in the UK, we have an amazing opportunity in this space. I think the rest of the world is less advanced. It's one thing that we can, it's a bonus for the UK, you know, particularly as we look to trade outwards. I would suggest that they invest heavily in it. I think English language is a big strength because, you know, a lot of the rest of the world contracts on that basis. We've actually done, you know, a fair bit of automation in other languages like Portuguese and Spanish and Russian and even Indonesian Bahasa. But pretty much every time we do that, we find that we're the first people to automate in that language on that technology, which is pretty indicative of the lead we have. You might think that the US would be more advanced. They're not at all. They're actually much further behind. So we should, for once, make the most of our advantage and strike while the iron's hot.
I mean, I echo everything everyone said. Particularly the education piece. I think if we're developing lawyers who are both legally competent but tech savvy, then that's, you know, more than half the battle. But I just responding to some of the questions that came in on the chat group for me, in terms of how to break down the fear of tech and encourage adoption, I would absolutely say, particularly for law teams that don't have the time to investigate all of this, just bring in the different tech suppliers, have them pitch to you, have them run through it for you, explain it to you, so you don't have to go out and do all this work. And then you can, you know, most of them will offer you a free demo, you know, so that's how I would approach it.
Thanks so much, everybody. Tim, you might want to say something at the end. Just once again, thank you. I see that Zoe has put on the chat room a link to the next webinar. I've got my own little sales pitch, and Tig and I are looking for some companies in the legal sector or legal counsel to talk to a little bit more and to try and map out those processes, the customer journey relating to AI and technology adoption. So if any of you are on this this webinar and would be interested in participating, it's something I hope that would add value to your business as well. But thank you very much. I'll leave it to Tim to say, I think, the final goodbye.
Yeah, no, thanks very much, Fraser, and thanks again to all of the speakers. It's been another really interesting event, and I think that obviously the chat and the comments going through will capture and kind of formulate into a blog to sit alongside the posting of the video. So again, kind of real thanks to everyone for giving up their time. I hope everyone's found it enjoyable. The last one in the series next week is on the scenarios, and we'll pick up on some of the design thinking approaches that we've adopted as well, with Lucy Kimball leading on that. So if you are around next Thursday for the last one in the series, please do tell a friend, do come along, and hopefully you'll be able to get something out of that as well. And we will share with you the link. And if you do want to get in touch with the project, Fraser's invitation there to participate directly. But equally, if you want to find out more about the scenarios or the design sprints, we'd be delighted to talk to you on a one-to-one basis about that as well. So thanks very much, and enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you.